Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Alicia Sachs. I am the Assistant Director of Professional Development and Certificates at the School of Continuing Studies with Georgetown University. Professional Development and Certificates provides more than 20 academic credentials in a broad range of subjects. We transform the lives and careers of diverse lifelong learners by providing access to engaged and personalized professional education for all. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Lindsay Thomas. Lindsay is the Director of Integrated Career Development for Digital Skills Bootcamps at Georgetown University's School of Continuing Studies. In this role, she provides individualized career coaching to help candidates identify and communicate their strengths and interests. She also conducts outreach to employers looking to hire talent from Georgetown University. Lindsay holds a BA in sociology and a master's in education and higher education and student affairs. Previously, she served in the Office of Career Development at Georgetown University's McCourt School of Public Policy, and she helped hundreds of students obtain meaningful careers and assisted many employers in developing their talent pipeline in Georgetown. I just want to say to you guys quickly before Lindsay starts, if you have any questions, please go ahead and type them into the question and answer chat box throughout the presentation, and we will be circling around at the end of the presentation to do a live question and answer with Lindsay.
Wonderful. Thank you for the introduction, Elisa. It's great to be here with you all this afternoon, especially now that we've kicked off the holiday season. Things feel much more positive. I want to start off by acknowledging how tough the job market has been for job seekers this year. I know it's been incredibly unpredictable, and that can be really frustrating as a job seeker when you're putting in the time and effort to apply. But never underestimate the value that you can bring to an organization. And today we're going to focus on positive, actionable items that you have control over in your job search that we know are effective. So I'm going to be going over resume tips and how to tailor your application materials, how to network virtually, and also how some tools on how to identify who's hiring. So let's get started with resumes. A study done by Career Builder found that 61% of hiring managers consider a customized resume to be the #1 tactic for applicants trying to boost their chance of getting an interview. Your resume is oftentimes the first chance employers get to view your professional background. And what they're looking for is to see what value you brought to your previous organizations, so that they can feel comfortable knowing that you would bring the same value to their organization. So one way to do that is through an accomplishment-based resume. So a lot of people, when they are creating their resumes, will have a responsibility-oriented resume. So they'll talk about what they did, but they don't talk about the impact and the value that that brought to their company. So a really good framework to use as you're thinking about tailoring your resume to be accomplishment-based is the PAR format. So what this means, P stands for problem. So what problem existed, right? Every job is created to solve a company problem. What action did you take to resolve that problem? So again, these two pieces, problem and action, are what most people have on their resume. And then the R stands for results. So what were the results of those actions, or what value did that bring to the organization? You always want to ask, so what? And what that means is, okay, so you did that. What's the importance or relevance of that to the interviewer and to the position you're applying to? And so that's a good way to kind of filter through your experiences and make sure that you are listing and tailoring the information that you put specifically to that job posting. And next slide, please. So as you're thinking about your accomplishments at your company, I have just some memory joggers to help get you started. So these are some things that can be considered an accomplishment. Did you achieve more with the same amount of resources? Did you achieve the same results with fewer resources? Did you take the initiative in confronting problems, opportunities, or challenges? Did you develop something new for your unit? Did you identify a need for a plan, program, product, or service? Did you prepare original reports, papers, documents, and for what use? Did you surpass accepted standards for quality or quantity? Did you receive any awards or recommendations? And did you lead, supervise, or manage a team? And what was the result of that leadership? So these are all things that can be considered an accomplishment and can show the value that you brought beyond just the responsibility of your position. And a really great way to drive these points home is, of course, to use metrics and measurable outcomes in relation to what you did. And next slide, please. So this is an example of an accomplishment makeover. So we have the responsibility-oriented bullet point and then the accomplishment-oriented one. So in a responsibility-oriented resume, you might say, developed advertising campaign for political client. So you've listed what you did, but there's not a whole lot of context for that recruiter or that hiring manager to go off of to see the impact that you made and to then translate that to the impact you could make at their organization. So with an accomplishment makeover, we might say, developed an effective paid Facebook advertising campaign for a political client generating 15,000 website visits. So you can see here the elements that they added. So they didn't just list what they did, they also included some details about the tools that they used. And then they also included the outcomes. So 15,000 website visits. And again, it was a measurable outcome to really show the impact and the context of what they did. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in addition to having your accomplishment-based bullet points, right? So you might have your general resume where you've listed all of those. The next step is, of course, to kind of tailor those bullet points and identify your transferable skills. So as you're looking through a job posting, you want to pay attention to the key requirements and skills that they're looking for, and also pay attention to the lingo. So if there are action verbs, you want to utilize those same action verbs, nouns that they're using, and you want to make sure that any skill set that they have listed on that posting is written very clearly in the same language on your resume. In addition to that, there are a few tips and tricks that you can use to identify your transferable skills. So when you're creating your resume, you don't just have to have your education with your degree and then your experience. You can add a little bit more detail to really highlight where those skills are coming from. So for example, let's say you're in a certificate program at SCS and you're using that to transfer into a new career. So you might, in your education section, list not only your certificate program, but the key concepts or courses that you're taking that relate to that position posting. And you might also list some selected course projects, because again, those count as experience to highlight how you've utilized those skills to solve a business problem. If you are someone who is applying for a position and your most recent position isn't really the most relevant, another trick you can use is to differentiate your experience sections. So for example, if you're applying for a data analytics position and you have data analytics experience, but it's 1 or 2 jobs ago, so it wouldn't be at the top of your resume, what you can do is create separate sections. So your first would of course be data analytics experience. You list that most relevant position first. And then let's say the rest of your experience was related to management, then you'd put management experience underneath that. And so that way you're still keeping in line with the reverse chronological order, but you're also bringing that most relevant experience to the forefront. Also organize your bullet points by relevance to the new position. A lot of people, again, thinking about responsibility-oriented resumes, will list their projects that they spent the most time on first. rather than the projects that are most relevant to the posting they're applying to. So make sure that you kind of reorder those based on which skills match most closely with the position posting. And again, using those keywords. Next slide, please. I've listed here some tools you can use as you're thinking about your transferable skills and tailoring your resume. A lot of companies, I think they say like almost 80% now, are using something called applicant tracking systems. And this is where they have some form of AI looking through resumes for them. And again, that artificial intelligence is looking for those keywords, terms, and skills within your resume. So if you don't have access, if you're not, an SDS student and you don't have access to career services, these are just some sites. A lot of times they'll give you like a couple of free resume scans that you can use to kind of make sure that you are hitting all the keywords and skills with your resume. So it's a good double check, and it can also be good to kind of train yourself to think that way just by using a few of these for a few of your resumes and applications. So if you're finding that you're submitting a lot of resumes and not really hearing back, I definitely recommend going through and making sure that you have good keyword matches. And this is also true for your LinkedIn profile. So recruiters are often on LinkedIn looking for candidates. And so a really good way to search engine optimize your profile is, again, to use these keywords. And some of these sites also have like a LinkedIn feature as well. So making sure that you're using keywords in your headline, your biography, and your experience section will make sure that you show up in those searches. Next slide, please. Great. Networking. So Gina Belli of PayScale is quoted as saying that about 70% of people ended up in their current position thanks to networking. And some experts believe that that number could be even higher. So everyone knows that networking is incredibly important. So we're going to talk about some key ways to do that in a virtual environment. So first, I want to talk about who's in your network. Anyone that you've previously worked with, whether that's colleagues, supervisors, someone you ran into in the lunchroom, as well as anyone that was a classmate, a professor, or attended an institution that you've also attended, so that alumni network. Anyone from community organizations that you know, like maybe religious institutions, or community service organizations, your personal business network, so maybe individuals that you've met at conferences, or even clients that you've worked with in the past, people that you know through your own interests and hobbies, and of course, your friends and your family. Next slide, please. So once you've kind of thought through and taken some time to write down all of the individuals in your network, you want to kind of define your purpose for networking, because the more clearly you explain your purpose, the easier it is for individuals to help you. So are you interested in learning more about an industry or organization? Are you job searching and you're trying to find a position? Do you want to get to know your colleagues better? Are you looking to maintain your current professional network? And start off by identifying those close contacts to speak with first, because again, if the better an individual knows you, the more likely it is that they'll want to help you. And next slide, please. So in a virtual environment, as you've probably noticed, it can be a little bit tough to meet new professional contexts when there's not big conferences and you're not, running into people in the office building. So something that I suggest for the virtual environment are informational interviews. So this is a self-initiated meeting that you set up with individuals in your network. So as you're thinking about kind of who to set this up with based on who's in your network, what I would suggest doing is kind of creating two different groups of people. So in your first group, you have thinking through all of your contacts, people that are working in your industry, people that are in a position you might want to be in one day, are people that are working for an employer you're interested in. And so those would be people that you would reach out to for these informational interviews for a 20-minute chat. And the second group, people that are in your network, but that maybe don't work in your field, or you're not interested in that organization, send them a separate email, letting them know that you're job searching, letting them know what you're looking for, and asking for their assistance. So you might say, please let me know if you hear of any openings or if you know of any individuals in these industries that it would be good for me to speak with. Because, you never know if your parents have old friends that work in your field that they could introduce you to, friends of friends that you maybe hadn't met before that are working in your field. So they can help you kind of grow your network as well from your close contacts. So in these informational interviews, again, it's a self-initiated meeting where you're asking the questions and you're gathering information about a particular employer or industry. And it's really common right now. I think a lot of people are networking. And so you would just conduct them virtually for 20 minutes over Zoom, phone call, Google Hangouts, and you can even ask the individual what they prefer, if they prefer phone or video. It's a good way to be polite in your request. Next slide, please. These are some common questions to ask. And I think it's important to remember with networking, just because you sat down and had a 20-minute conversation with that individual, if they don't have a job opportunity available, it's not a wasted experience. You never know who they might know that they could introduce you to. You never know if a position will pop up in the future. So they might have valuable information that they can give you to kind of help you tailor and target different organizations. So they really can add value, even if it's not an immediate, like, yes, I have a job open in my unit that I can give to you. So these are some questions that you can ask, which again, it kind of depends on the purpose of your networking. But some ones I think are really impactful are, what salary ranges what are the salary ranges for various levels in your field? What skills or abilities are common in this field? You can even ask them, if their organization is currently hiring, or if they know of other organizations in your industry that are currently hiring, because I know that can be a little bit difficult to parse out right now. Some good relationship building questions, how did you get started in the industry? What do you like about the company? Are you optimistic about its future? And then you always want to end by asking them if they have anyone else they suggest you speak with. That's a really good way to, again, get those introductions and to grow your network and to keep kind of having these conversations that can eventually lead to potentially an internal referral and getting that position. Next slide, please. So these are some tips or tools on identifying who's hiring. I know that can be a really tricky concept right now, especially because with some organizations, they're hiring in some units and not others. And as a candidate, it can be really hard to parse that out. So again, asking during those informational interviews is a good way to get that information. But there's also a lot of lists out right now to help you. So LinkedIn has a really great who's hiring right now report. And so it kind of lists them based on the number of positions that they've had posted. And you can kind of use that to filter through and see. Monster puts out a report every week of 100 companies that are currently hiring. A site called Candor has just like an open forum where individuals can post and say, such and such company is on a hiring freeze right now. So if you've been frustrated about hearing back from a company, you can check and see if they're on there. And then if you're in the DMV area and interested in federal government opportunities, they have a list of mission critical federal government jobs, which oftentimes the hiring process for those is much quicker than your regular USA jobs experience. So that could be a good place to look as well. And next slide, please. So in addition to these lists and things like that, another good thing to look into, especially if you're living in a metropolitan area, are some of your local economic development agencies. So some of these are tied to state and local government, some of them are independent organizations, but their purpose is to build relationships with all businesses in your particular area. And so they might have policies to incentivize new businesses to come in. But another important thing that they work on is helping these companies draw talent from the local community. So sometimes they will put on job fairs, they'll create different reports. I know in Northern Virginia, there's a list of, the fastest growing tech companies that they had put out, one of the local economic development agencies had put out. So definitely check those websites and see if they have any information listed about companies that are doing really well in your area, things like that. Because oftentimes on the lists that I showed you, they'll have a lot of the larger companies on there, right? Because it's companies that are hiring for a lot of positions or that have paid to put their postings on places like Indeed and things like that. But these local economic development agencies, again, they work with all businesses in your area, small, medium, that you might not see showing up on those lists, even though they're hiring. Again, your networking contacts, they're great to reach out to figure out what they might know about your particular industry. And then job boards. So places like Indeed, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, all list position postings. And I think one key thing to remember about job boards is how important the timing of your application is. So if you see a position you're really interested in, definitely try to apply within a week or two of that posting. I've spoken to some recruiters who are saying that they received 1,000 applications for one position, and they are not required to go through all of those applications. So if you can be one of the first resumes in that pile, that'll help to increase your chances of getting an interview as well. All right. So that was my tips and tricks for job searching in the new year. And I look forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you so much, Lindsay, for that wonderful presentation. Right now, we only have one question. I hope that you guys will sort of rack your brains and think about the things that are really challenging to you with searching for a new career. You can get specific, and please just write the questions in, and we will get down to how we can help you guys the best. So our first question is from Cherish Wilson. And Cherish says, I would like a career in the hospitality tourism industry. However, I lack general work experience because I'm a full-time student. How can I improve on my resume to reflect relevant coursework? I was told that jobs only care about work experience.
That's a great question, Cherish. Thank you for sharing. I think, as you're creating your resume, your courses that you're taking in your education absolutely count. So some tips and things that you can do to kind of highlight that experience would be to think through kind of the coursework you've taken that is most applicable to the positions that you're applying to. And so in your education section, you might put under your degree relevant coursework and list the names of those courses. And then rather than having an experience section, you might put course projects. And then thinking through the courses that you've taken, a lot of them are project-based. And so which courses did you work on projects that were most closely related to the tourism industry? And how you would do that is you would put the name of the university, the name of the course, rather than the name of the business. And then you would put your role in the project. And then you would put bullet points just like you would for your experience section on what you did in that project, as well as the dates that it took place. So that's a good way to highlight those skills. And then also at the bottom of your resume, you could put technical skills and abilities. And so listing those key things that you have worked on in the tourism industry and learned from your classes as just a summary of these are all the skills that I have related to that area. But you can absolutely use course projects, community involvement, any volunteer work that you've done on your resume. It doesn't just have to be, professional experience.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Our next question is from Jordan, and Jordan asks, if you aren't finding any job openings in your dream field, should you accept a different offer or should you hold out?
That's a really great question. And I think a lot of people are struggling with that right now as hiring trends change. And I think, it's important to view your career as not just the next jump, but, multiple steps out. So if you're not finding a whole lot of positions to apply for in the field that you're interested in, and maybe, you're in a little bit of a time crunch or a financial crunch, then I would say, absolutely take a chance on something a bit different and maybe look for things, again, where those skills could transfer into the career that you really want. And so rather than thinking of it as, oh, I'm accepting this position because it's not what I really want, but it's only what's available, try and think of it as I'm accepting this position because it's what's available and it's going to grow my skills so that in the future, when those positions do become more available, I can apply for them and I'll have the skill sets that I need.
That was a really great answer, Lindsay. Thank you. Our next question is from Alexa. Alexa says, with January and February being the biggest months for hiring, what do you suggest we do to try and stand out among other applicants beyond just tailoring our resumes? What is the best way to follow up if the ad says no calls without being persistent or disrespectful?
That's a great question. And I think what I've heard from recruiters is that they really value individuals that have taken the time to get to know their organization. And you can highlight that in a few different ways. The first is in simply just by using your cover letter in that first paragraph, highlighting the research that you've done on the organization and why you're interested in them. And the second way to do that is again through networking at that organization. So, if there are, and LinkedIn will show you if there are alumni from your school that work at that current organization, anyone that you know, or if there's even recruiters listed that you can contact, those are good to reach out to. And it shows that you've taken initiative. And again, if you're able to meet with one of those individuals, you can refer to that conversation in your cover letter to show that you've done your research as well, and even reach back out to that individual to let them know that you're applying. Because oftentimes they submit an internal referral for you, they're incentivized through monetary compensation and whatnot. If it says no calls, I would respect that. So what you might do then would be, to find, if it says no calls for like the recruiter, then maybe you find someone on LinkedIn that at that organization that you can talk to, not just about the specific position you're interested in, but that you're interested in that company in general, and you'd really love, their advice and to learn more about them. And that puts a little bit less pressure on that conversation if that's what they're trying to avoid by having just tons of applicants reaching out to them at one time. But another good strategy to kind of mitigate that is to come up with a list of like 20 companies that you're hoping to target and starting to meet with those individuals, in the December-ish, or reaching out to them at least in the December-ish timeframe, so that you've already had that conversation by the time positions are posted in January and February.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. This is really wonderful information. We have a question from Sergio, who first says, thank you for all the tips. And then he says, for local economic development agencies, can you provide some examples other than local chamber of commerce?
Sure. It's different for everything, but there's like, there is a Fairfax Economic Development Agency. So depending on where you're located, it kind of depends on the region. So like I know in the DMV, there are some state-run agencies, and then there are some independent agencies that work with both states and employers. But if you do a Google search for, economic development in whatever city you're located in, it should come up with a list of those agencies that you can kind of look through. So hopefully that answers your question.
Great. Next question is from Yuri, and Yuri says, what is your advice regarding applying to multiple positions at one company? Would applying to multiple positions at different experience levels potentially have a negative effect?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think companies are receiving so many applications that I think they probably won't notice off the bat that you have applied to positions at different levels. As they're screening through applicants, they'll probably first just select whether or not you are qualified for the posting. So I would say if you're comfortable with a position in any of those levels, go ahead and apply, and that company, if they're interested in your application, can kind of speak with you, and the recruiter can kind of help you decide which level you would be most competitive at. So I really don't think that there is anything wrong with applying to multiple postings, even at different levels in a company, particularly if you meet those qualifications and you're interested in all of them. Then I think it's worth applying, because you never know, how the hiring process will work out.
Awesome. Our next question is a little bit more technical from Lauren. Lauren says that she heard that the artificial intelligence filters do not work well with colors and certain fonts. Is this true? And do you have any suggestions with resume formatting, especially when a resume cannot be condensed into one page?
Sure, that's a great question. And I do know that, yes, sometimes, depending on the technology used, if you have a lot of formatting and color in your resume, it might not pick up on everything. So I think it's important to keep it as simple as possible. So having standard margins, using standard fonts like Times New Roman, having multiple pages should be fine. Well, I say that with a caveat. So when you're applying, if you're applying to private companies or for-profit companies, oftentimes you want to have just a one-page resume. If you're applying to the nonprofit sector or research positions, you can go up to 2 pages. And then if you're applying for the federal government, of course, it can be as long as you want. So there is a caveat to that. But yes, I would say try and keep formatting as simple as possible to make sure that nothing gets lost.
Great, thank you. Next question is from Duri. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Please forgive me if I'm not. And they say, thank you so much for the presentation. Could you speak a little bit more about transitioning to a new career? I'm a journalist on my 3rd layoff, now deciding to pivot to nonprofit. While I'm an experienced storyteller, I don't have branding or communication strategy experience. How can I sell myself? Also, how should I present myself on LinkedIn?
That's a great question. And I think it sounds like you've already started to identify some of those transferable skills, right, through storytelling. So I would kind of weave your narrative around how you crafted those stories based on the brand for the journal that you were publishing for, or the newspaper. If you are applying for positions where they are looking for like leadership experience, management experience, those are oftentimes transferable. Content creation, sounds like you definitely have skills in content creation by writing articles and things like that. If they do any kind of customer research, maybe translating any experience you have in interviewing individuals for your journal into that kind of research piece. So yes, so those are some of the transferable skills that you can kind of look through. And I think oftentimes between industries, there are concepts that are very similar. They're just using a different language. So kind of thinking about, okay, we call it, maybe we call it, writing, and they call it content creation. So just kind of switching the words up in that way on your resume. And on your LinkedIn profile, again, switching those key terms that kind of you have experience in, but your particular field calls it something different, switching those key terms up. And then definitely in your headline, in your biography, depending on the position title you're looking for, make sure that you have that position title listed in there. So an easy way to do that is, I'm an aspiring, brand management or brand manager or something along those lines, because that will get the keyword in there, and it also makes it very clear what kinds of opportunities that you're looking for.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Our next question is from Jordan, and Jordan says he's about to finish up his master's degree, but he lacks real-world experience. So he's trying to figure out how he can determine his worth salary-wise.
That's a great question. So for master's degrees, oftentimes companies will count that as like a year or two of experience because it's beyond the bachelor's degree. And again, a lot of times you're getting good in-class projects that are related to the field. Some really good resources you can use are sites like PayScale, Glassdoor. I think even Monster has some salary information where you can type in your degree that you obtained, your years of experience, specific skill sets that you might have, and the kinds of positions you're applying for. And it'll tell you kind of as a candidate what the typical salary ranges for you would be within a specific location. So I would use that as a resource. And Glassdoor is a really good resource for looking at individual company information. So if the company is listed on Glassdoor, you can go to the salary section to see if anyone has input information for the particular position you're applying to. And I would say with salary, I mean, if it's listed as a range, if they've listed a range, or if you see other individuals within a given range on sites like Glassdoor, then, go for the top of that range, and then they can negotiate lower. You can come to a mutually satisfactory agreement, but always start with the top of that range because, I mean, you have the experience they're looking for if they offered you the position.
Great, thank you so much, Lindsay. I wanted to let everybody know that we're gonna keep going with the questions until about 12:45. So thank you all so much for being on the line, and this is great information. So keep the questions rolling in. The next one is from Rula, and Rula says, how can I enhance the fact that I have 9 years of international experience in Switzerland, as well as 5 years US work experience? It seems that employers are only interested in the US experience. I also speak 3 languages and graduated with a master's in PR and corporate communications from Georgetown.
Oh, well, congratulations on your graduation from Georgetown. That is a wonderful question. And I think, I mean, those are definitely skills to highlight. So I think to kind of bring that forward, one, if the positions that you had held in Switzerland were related to the positions that you're applying for now, then definitely talk up those skill sets. And then in addition to that, maybe talking up, your intercultural communication skills, your adaptability. I mean, going from one culture's work environment to another culture's work environment, that's a huge adaptability skill that I think is incredibly important, especially in times like today where, things are all over the place in terms of if people are working in person or remotely and all of that. And also something that you might consider are is looking at kind of multinational organizations or NGOs that really value those international skill sets. And then that's, I mean, you can obviously talk those up. So big multinational companies with offices around the world, you might be working on projects with individuals located in different areas. So having those intercultural communication skills is incredibly important to those organizations. And then for NGOs or organizations like the World Bank, I mean, having language skill, 3 languages, like that's a really important part of getting work done for those kinds of organizations. So yeah, I would say focusing on kind of the adaptability and communication skills, and then also considering focusing on companies that value those skill sets as well, because it's an important part of their business structure.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay. Next question is from Hattie. Hattie says, does it matter how many people in my network in LinkedIn? I get a lot of invitations to connect, and I almost always accept these invitations. So will the number of my job connections have an impact on my candidacy to a job I applied for?
I don't think that it's, that your number of contacts has a huge impact on, individuals looking at your profile, but it does have an impact for you, right? So the more individuals you connect with that then, the more connected you are. And the easier it is for you to keep in touch with those contacts, right? Because it's very easy to keep in touch through social media. You can like their posts, you can comment on them, you can send them congratulations because you have an update right in front of you. So if you don't know them that well, they might not have told you that via email. You can still kind of keep in touch and build that relationship. So while, individuals looking in might not really care how many contacts you have, I do think it could be beneficial for you to kind of connect with people and to keep in touch via social media that way.
Okay, great. It looks like we'll probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions. The next question is from Kiefer, and Kiefer says, thank you so much for the great presentation. The question is, as a graduate student in the PR Corporate Communications program and active duty military, when applying for government jobs, how would you approach applying for a federal job that may require a background in PR, but I've not yet completed the degree?
Absolutely. So federal government positions are incredibly specific about the requirements. And so looking through to see, does it say X many years of experience in this field or, a degree in the field, or are they really only looking for years of experience? Because it will be very clear on a federal job posting kind of what those requirements are. And then if you can qualify using your educational experience, then absolutely make sure that you list your education on there, your relevant coursework, and because it's federal government, your resume can be as long as it needs to be. So you can list your course projects that highlight kind of the key skills from the posting that you've worked on in class as well.
Okay, great. Once again, Lindsay, thank you so much. This is going to be our last question. And this question is from an SCS graduate. So congratulations on your degree. And they have a degree in sports industry management. I was hoping to secure a job in sports marketing, but I haven't had any luck. This year, I've applied for a few digital marketing gigs, and I got some interviews, but the feedback is that I'm too seasoned. What's going on? Do I come across as too confident in my interviews? I have about 6 years of experience in freelance writing and social media management.
That's great. I mean, yeah, what a compliment, but also how frustrating. I would say, and you could kind of ask them to elaborate on what they mean by that. If they're saying that, had they had a higher level position that you had been considered for that position instead. And then, if they have more of a manager or higher up position, that you can apply for that. Yeah, so it's a little bit hard to say without context. But yeah, so you may consider, if you're getting that feedback, potentially applying to higher level positions, because it sounds like maybe you're kind of overqualified for some of the ones that they're looking for. But also you can kind of mitigate that. You know, you definitely don't want to downplay what you've done, but you can maybe highlight your, what new things you're wanting to learn from the position. So if they're coming in thinking like, oh, he's already done this already, like he's going to get bored and leave in a year, what you can do then, before they even ask if it's feedback that you've gotten multiple times, is just to say how excited you are about the position because it will teach you XYZ things, which complement the skill sets that you already have from your 6 years of experience.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lindsay. I see one question here that is kind of related to follow-up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to chat everybody the link to our LinkedIn group, which you guys can all feel free to join, and we will accept you and you can chat with us there. And we also will be sending out a recording of today's session. And then lastly, if you guys have any specific questions, please feel free to email pdcacademics@georgetown.edu. And I will also put that email in the chat so that if any of you guys have any follow-up questions that weren't answered today, you can just shoot them to that email, and Lindsay and I will get back to you as soon as we can. So at this time, I just wanted to thank you again, Lindsay, for your wonderful presentation and for everybody's attention and great questions today on the call. And please follow up with us, and we hope to see you guys again at the next Knowledge at Noon session. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everyone.